Picture yourself walking through the golden sands of ancient Egypt, beneath a sky so vast and blue it feels like another world entirely. Here, in the land of pharaohs and pyramids, something far more personal and mysterious captures the imagination: the dazzling, sometimes bizarre royal jewelry that adorned Egypt's most powerful rulers. These weren't just accessories, they were statements of divinity, power, and belief in the afterlife, crafted with such skill and symbolism that they still leave historians and treasure hunters utterly spellbound. What if I told you that some of these pieces were so unusual, so deeply intertwined with magic and mystery, that they challenge everything we think we know about ancient craftsmanship and ambition? From solid gold pectorals embedded with stones that supposedly held the power of the gods, to elaborate headdresses designed not just for beauty, but for protection in the journey to the underworld, Egyptian royal jewelry tells a story far richer and weirder than mere opulence. Imagine a world where gems were chosen not only for their brilliance but for their supposed supernatural properties, where lapis lazuli represented the night sky, and carnelian was believed to hold the very blood of life. The pharaohs didn't just wear these treasures, they lived and died by them, convinced that these ornaments could guide their souls, ward off evil, and secure their legacy for eternity. This journey into the heart of ancient Egypt's most enigmatic treasures is about to reveal secrets that have lain hidden for millennia. We're not just talking about shiny objects, we're uncovering a worldview, a culture that blended art, religion, and power in ways that still leave us in awe. So settle in, because together we're going to explore some of the most astonishing and bizarre pieces ever created, pieces that speak of love, loss, magic, and the unyielding human desire to leave a mark on eternity. You're about to see ancient Egypt in a whole new light, through the glittering eyes of those who believed their jewels could conquer even death itself. Long before the Great Pyramids etched their silhouettes against the Egyptian sky, even before the first pharaohs united the two lands, a ruler known only as Scorpion wielded power in the Nile Valley. And it is from his time, an era shrouded in the mists of the pre-dynastic period, that we find one of the most astonishing and ancient examples of royal adornment: not a necklace or a crown, but a ceremonial macehead, meticulously inlaid with gold foil so delicate and detailed it whispers secrets of a kingdom yet to be. Imagine this not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of ultimate authority, likely held aloft during rituals that affirmed the king's divine right to rule. The macehead itself is carved from limestone, but its true power lies in the scenes hammered into sheets of gold and carefully applied to its surface. This isn't just decoration, it's a narrative in metal. We see the figure of the king, larger than life, wearing the iconic white crown of Upper Egypt. He holds a hoe, poised to break ground for what appears to be a canal or a foundation, a powerful image that tells us his role was not just as a conqueror, but as a nurturer of the land, the one who controlled the life-giving waters of the Nile itself. But the symbolism deepens. Below him, attendants are depicted carrying standards topped with symbols of gods and provinces, suggesting this was a moment of consolidation, of bringing different regions under a single rule. And in one particularly compelling section, we see rows of birds dangling from poles, which some Egyptologists interpret as representations of conquered peoples, their totems captured and displayed. This gold foil is, in essence, the first political propaganda, a declaration of Scorpion's military might and his divine mandate to bring order from chaos. The metalworking skill this represents is nothing short of revolutionary for its time. We are talking about a period over 5,000 years ago. To hammer native gold, a rare and mystical substance associated with the flesh of the gods, into such a thin, pliable foil required an incredible understanding of the material. To then etch these intricate scenes into it with such precision points to a specialized class of artisans who were already mastering techniques that would become the hallmark of Egyptian jewelry for millennia to come. This single artifact shatters any notion that early Egyptian culture was primitive. It was already sophisticated, symbolic, and fiercely ambitious, laying the artistic and ideological groundwork for everything that would follow. Moving from those early symbols of earthly power, Egyptian royal jewelry would evolve into something even more profound, weaving complex religious beliefs into every gleaming surface. Perhaps no piece embodies this deeper spiritual purpose more completely than the magnificent ankh-shaped pectoral. This was far more than a beautiful chest ornament. It was a wearable prayer, a physical key to immortality suspended over the very heart of the pharaoh. Crafted from the most precious materials on earth, these pectorals were masterpieces of the jeweler's art. Imagine a framework of the purest, most radiant gold, a metal the Egyptians called the flesh of the gods. This divine metal was then inlaid with meticulously cut tiles of deep blue lapis lazuli, a stone imported from hundreds of miles away because it was seen as a piece of the night sky itself. They often added fiery red carnelian, believed to contain the blood of the goddess Isis and the power of life, and cool green feldspar, representing fertility and the renewal of the Nile's banks. The contrast was intentional and symbolic, a miniature cosmos of celestial blue, solar gold, earthly green, and life-giving red, all contained within the sacred loop of the ankh. The shape itself was the entire point. The ankh, that iconic cross with a looped top, was the hieroglyphic symbol for life, but not just earthly existence. It meant eternal life, the breath of creation, and the divine power that sustained the universe. By wearing this symbol directly over their heart, pharaohs and queens were literally cloaking themselves in the concept of life eternal. They weren't just hoping for an afterlife, they were actively harnessing its power through this sacred object. It was a constant, physical reminder of their divine right to rule and their anticipated journey to join the gods. This belief in its protective power was absolute. In life, the pectoral was thought to act as a shield, deflecting malevolent spirits and misfortune with its potent symbolism. But its true purpose was revealed in death. Placed among the mummy's wrappings, the ankh pectoral became a crucial amulet for the perilous journey through the underworld. Ancient funerary texts describe countless dangers: demons, lakes of fire, serpentine monsters aiming to extinguish a soul forever. The ankh was a tool to overcome these obstacles, a divine passport that proved the deceased was worthy of eternal life. It was a promise to the gods and a command to the forces of chaos: this heart shall live forever. Yet, for all their mastery with gold and precious stones, the ancient Egyptians faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge with another metal, iron. In a land rich in gold and copper, naturally occurring iron ore was virtually non-existent, and the technology to smelt it from rock would not arrive for centuries. So when a young pharaoh was buried with a beautifully crafted iron dagger, its very presence was a profound mystery. The discovery of Tutankhamun's iron blade wasn't just a find, it was a revelation that forced us to completely rethink the boundaries of ancient technology and spirituality. This was no ordinary metal. Scientific analysis using modern X-ray technology confirmed what many Egyptologists had long suspected: the iron in Tutankhamun's dagger did not come from the earth, but from the stars. It was forged from a meteorite that had crashed into the desert, a literal piece of the cosmos gifted to the pharaoh. To the Egyptians, this explained everything. They called this mysterious sky-born metal Bia en Pet, which translates to iron from the sky, It wasn't just a rare material, it was a divine substance, a physical fragment of the gods themselves. Imagine the awe they must have felt, finding a strange, heavy rock fallen from the heavens, already imbued with a metallic brilliance that no earthly stone possessed. It wasn't mined, it was received. Working this celestial material was a task of almost unimaginable difficulty, a true testament to the skill and patience of royal artisans. Unlike gold, which can be cold worked and hammered into shape at room temperature, meteoritic iron requires intense, controlled heat to be forged. The smiths would have had to repeatedly heat the metal in a charcoal furnace and hammer it while hot, a process known as smithing, to slowly shape it into the elegant, narrow blade we see today. The exquisite gold handle, inlaid with delicate rock crystal and intricate designs, only heightens the contrast, showcasing their effortless mastery of earthly treasures against the staggering effort required to tame the metal of the gods. Given its divine origin and immense difficulty of production, this dagger was never intended for the battlefield. Its role was entirely ceremonial and symbolic. Placed within the king's mummy wrappings, it served as a powerful amulet for his journey to the afterlife. The iron from the sky was a direct connection to the celestial realm, a tool that would help the pharaoh ascend to join the sun god Ra in his eternal bark sailing across the heavens. It was the ultimate symbol of his divine right, a weapon not against mortal enemies, but against the chaotic forces of the underworld, ensuring his safe passage into eternity. This single artifact perfectly embodies the Egyptian worldview, where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual was as thin as the edge of a blade forged from a star. But if the pharaoh's celestial dagger was a key to the heavens, then the broad collar was the very garment of the afterlife itself. This brings us to one of the most personal and stunning examples of this belief, the broad collar discovered gracing the neck of a noblewoman named Senebtisi. While we are captivated by the treasures of kings, it is often in the tombs of the elite that we find the most intimate connections to the everyday beliefs of ancient Egypt. Senebtisi's collar from the Middle Kingdom is not just a piece of jewelry, it is a masterpiece of symbolic art, a protective shell, and a detailed map of the soul's aspirations. Crafted with breathtaking precision, the collar is a radiant symphony of color and material. Imagine thousands upon thousands of tiny beads, each one individually drilled and strung, creating a sweeping semicircle designed to drape across the chest and shoulders. The majority of these beads are made of a brilliant turquoise blue faience, a manufactured material the Egyptians perfected. By firing a quartz paste, they created a glazed ceramic that mimicked the precious turquoise mined in the Sinai, a color that evoked vitality, protection, and the joy of life. This dazzling blue field is then punctuated by rows of deep, fiery red carnelian beads, representing the blood of life and the power of the sun, and accented with the warm glint of real gold, which would have caught the flickering light of oil lamps in the tomb. The overall effect is one of immense, shimmering wealth, but every single element was chosen for a reason far beyond mere aesthetics. This magnificent piece was not created for a party or a state function. It was funerary regalia placed directly on Senebtisi's mummy to be worn for eternity. In the Egyptian view of the afterlife, the journey was perilous, and the soul needed all the protection it could get. The broad collar, known as a wesek, served as a powerful amulet. Its heavy, encompassing weight was believed to shield the vulnerable neck and throat of the deceased from evil forces that might seek to strangle or harm the spirit. It was a literal armor of faith, its repeating patterns and sacred colors forming a barrier against chaos, yet its purpose was also one of transformation and identity. By adorning herself with this collar in death, Senebtisi was making a definitive statement about her status and her readiness to be reborn. She was declaring herself a person of importance, worthy of a splendid existence in the field of reeds. The materials spoke a language the gods would understand, the faience of new life, the carnelian of eternal vitality, the gold of the divine. When the gods looked upon her, they would see this radiant color and recognize a justified soul, one prepared and equipped for the pleasures of the afterlife. It was her passport, her protection, and her finest attire all in one, ensuring that her journey would not be one of poverty and fear, but one of beauty, safety, and eternal grace. And it was not just the neck and chest that required this divine protection. The ancient Egyptians believed in equipping the entire body for eternity, right down to the very ground upon which a pharaoh would walk in the afterlife. This brings us to one of the most intimate and astonishing discoveries from the tomb of Tutankhamun, his solid gold sandals. Imagine the scene as Howard Carter first peered into the innermost shrine, his lamp illuminating the nested coffins. When the lid of the magnificent solid gold coffin was finally lifted, they found the mummy of the young king, not wrapped in simple linen, but adorned from head to toe in a spectacular suite of golden regalia. And on his feet were these incredible sandals, crafted not from leather or reed, but from beaten gold so finely worked they were likely molded directly from a wooden form. The craftsmanship is simply breathtaking. These were not clumsy blocks of metal, they were flexible, detailed, and designed with an almost loving precision. The soles are engraved with intricate patterns that mimic the weave of actual red sandals, a beautiful and paradoxical detail, taking a humble, everyday material and recreating it in the most precious substance on earth. But the true genius lies in the imagery on the upper straps. Here, we find a detailed tableau of Egypt's enemies. Engraved into the golden surface are the traditional 9 bows, representing the 9 archenemies of Egypt, and figures of bound Nubian and Syrian captives. Their arms are tied behind their backs, and their bodies are arranged so that with every step the pharaoh would take in the afterlife, he would literally be trampling his foes beneath his feet. This was far more than a symbolic display of power. It was believed to be magically functional. In the Egyptian worldview, the enemies of order and chaos were a constant threat, even after death. Evil spirits and demonic forces could impede the soul's journey. By wearing these sandals, Tutankhamun was perpetually neutralizing that threat. Each step was an act of domination, a continuous ritual that crushed disorder underfoot and maintained the divine balance of Mad. The sandals ensured that the path before him, both literally and spiritually, would always be clear and secure. Ultimately, these golden sandals were a fundamental part of his resurrection kit. The Egyptians had a deeply held belief that the deceased needed to be physically complete and properly equipped to function in the afterlife. Just as he had his dagger to fight off underworld demons and his broad collar to protect his throat, he needed these sandals to walk confidently into eternity. They guaranteed that the boy king, who may have had a physically challenged life, would stride with strength and authority in the next world. He was not just buried with treasure, he was buried with a functional, practical tool for his immortal soul, proving that for the ancient Egyptians, preparation for eternity was an all-encompassing act, leaving nothing, not even the soles of one's feet, to chance. But this intricate fusion of gold and belief wasn't confined to the feet or the chest. It extended all the way to the very crown of a queen's head. Among the most majestic and symbolically potent pieces of royal regalia was the vulture headdress, a masterpiece of the goldsmith's art that transformed a queen into a living embodiment of divine protection. Worn by powerful figures like the great royal wife Nefertari, this wasn't merely a beautiful accessory, it was a crown of power, a statement of celestial guardianship that identified its wearer with one of Egypt's most ancient and formidable goddesses, Nekhbit. Crafted for maximum symbolic impact, the headdress was an engineering marvel of precious materials. Imagine a cap of the purest gold, designed to fit snugly over the elaborate wig of a queen. From this golden base, The body of a vulture would seem to enfold her entire head, its wings draping down along the sides of her face in a protective embrace. The bird's feathers were not merely suggested, they were meticulously rendered in exquisite detail using countless tiny inlays of lapis lazuli, turquoise, and carnelian. Each stone was carefully cut and set to create a shimmering, feathery texture, with the deep blue of lapis representing the divine realm and the red of carnelian symbolizing the life-giving blood of the goddess. The vulture's head, often crafted from a single piece of polished gold or dark wood, would project forward from the queen's brow, its eyes perhaps inlaid with obsidian or rock crystal, making the gaze of the goddess seem piercingly alive. This specific bird was chosen with profound intention. The Egyptian vulture, or nekhbit, was not seen as a carrion eater in a negative sense, but as an incredibly powerful mother figure. Egyptians observed that these birds were fiercely protective of their young, and this nurturing, defensive instinct was what they sought to channel. By wearing this headdress, a queen was directly identifying herself with Nekhbit, the patron goddess of Upper Egypt. She became the Great White One of Nekhbit, the maternal protector of the entire kingdom. The outstretched wings of the vulture were not just for show, they were a magical gesture, a constant ritual meant to shield the pharaoh, her children, and by extension, all of Egypt from any and all harm. It was a permanent act of prayer for safety cast in gold and gemstones. We see this powerful symbolism come alive in depictions of important religious ceremonies, particularly the Heb-Sed festival, a ritual of royal renewal that reaffirmed the pharaoh's strength and right to rule. In temple reliefs, a queen like Nefertari is often shown standing behind her husband, the vulture headdress clearly visible. Her presence in this regalia was crucial. She wasn't just a spectator. As the living incarnation of Nekhbit, her role was to use her divine power to protect the sacred energy of the ceremony and to magically ensure the successful rebirth of the king's power. In this context, the headdress was a functional tool of state, its power as real and necessary as any army. It cemented her role not just as a wife, but as a key pillar of the monarchy's stability and a vital conduit to the protective, mothering forces of the divine. While the vulture headdress symbolized a queen's protective might, another creature, far humbler in appearance, held a significance so profound that it became one of the most ubiquitous and powerful symbols in all of ancient Egypt, the scarab beetle. To the modern eye, an insect that rolls balls of dung might seem an unlikely candidate for a sacred jewel, but the Egyptians saw in its behavior a perfect mirror of their most fundamental cosmic belief, the daily rebirth of the sun. This connection elevated the scarab, or khepir, from a simple insect to a potent emblem of creation, transformation, and eternal life, making it the centerpiece of some of the most spiritually charged jewelry ever crafted. These amulets were fashioned from a stunning variety of materials, each chosen for its specific properties and symbolic weight. For everyday use and for placing within mummy wrappings, steatite, a soft and easily carved stone, was a common choice. Once sculpted, these steatite scarabs were glazed with a brilliant blue or green faience, transforming them into dazzling, durable objects that shimmered with the color of life and rebirth. For the royalty and the elite, however, only the most precious substances would do. Scarabs were intricately carved from deep blue lapis lazuli, seen as a fragment of the night sky, or from fiery red carnelian, representing the blood of life. The most prestigious of all were those wrought from solid gold, the flesh of the gods themselves, their surfaces often inlaid with detailed hieroglyphs or other protective symbols. The choice of material wasn't just about wealth, it was about amplifying the magical potency of the amulet to its maximum possible strength. The core of the scarab's meaning lies in its namesake, the god Khepri. The Egyptians observed the dung beetle meticulously rolling its ball across the ground, and they saw a parallel to the sun god Ra being pushed across the sky. Just as the beetle's ball contained the eggs for its next generation, the sun ball contained the seed of its own rebirth. Khepri was the god of the morning sun, the embodiment of this concept of spontaneous creation and renewal. He was often depicted as a man with a scarab for a head, or simply as the beetle itself. To wear a scarab was to align oneself with this unstoppable, daily cycle of resurrection. It was a declaration that the wearer, too, would be reborn, their spirit pushing the sun of their own consciousness into a new dawn. This powerful symbolism made scarab amulets incredibly versatile in their use. They were mounted on wire to be worn as pendants, resting over the heart to protect one's center of being and intention. They were also expertly set into swiveling bezels and transformed into rings. A royal signet ring often featured a scarab base, its flat underside engraved with the owner's name and titles. But this was more than a seal for authenticating documents. Each time the ring was pressed into wax or clay, it was not just leaving an impression, it was performing a miniature act of creation, stamping the owner's identity into existence again and again, much like Khepri recreating the sun. In death, the scarab's role became absolutely critical. The most important funerary amulet was the heart scarab, a large, masterfully carved specimen that was placed directly over the heart of the mummy. This was not for decoration, it was a magical tool for the most pivotal moment in the afterlife journey, the weighing of the heart ceremony. The Egyptians believed the heart, not the brain, was the seat of intelligence, memory, and morality. It would be placed on a scale against the feather of Maat, the goddess of truth and order. If the heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by a monstrous creature, and the soul would cease to exist. The heart scarab, often inscribed with a spell from the Book of the Dead, was designed to prevent this catastrophe. It served as a substitute, silent conscience, imploring the heart not to bear witness against its owner. It was the ultimate insurance policy for eternity, a beetle-shaped guardian ensuring the soul's heart would be light enough to achieve everlasting life. But if the scarab protected the heart and the vulture shielded the head, then the ears of a pharaoh were gateways to a different kind of power entirely, a power that reached its most bizarre and revolutionary expression during the rule of the heretic king, Akhenaten. In the sun-baked city of Amarna, a place built from scratch to worship a single deity, the Aten or sun disk, every aspect of life and art was transformed. And nothing captures this strange and fleeting cultural experiment quite like the extraordinary ear ornaments that Akhenaten and his family are depicted wearing. These were not subtle studs or delicate hoops, they were massive, disc-like plugs that stretched the earlobe to a dramatic and almost otherworldly degree. Crafted from materials that shimmered under the intense Egyptian sun, these ear studs, often called ear stools by Egyptologists due to their distinct shape, were substantial pieces of jewelry. While simpler versions for daily wear might have been made of glazed faience or even wood, the royal versions were undoubtedly creations of immense luxury. Imagine large discs of polished gold, perhaps inlaid with bands of deep blue lapis lazuli or vibrant red glass materials that would catch and reflect the light of their sole god, the Aten, in a dazzling display. Their size is what is so immediately striking. They weren't designed to be discreet, they were meant to be seen from a distance, to alter the very silhouette of the pharaoh's head and mark him as utterly distinct from all who came before. This radical shift in personal adornment was a direct reflection of Akhenaten's revolutionary agenda. He didn't just change the state religion, he initiated a total cultural overhaul, and this new art style, known as Amarna art, was its most visible propaganda. Out were the idealized, muscular, and eternally youthful depictions of pharaohs. In their place came a startling and exaggerated naturalism. Akhenaten was shown with a long, gaunt face, a heavy jaw, narrow eyes, a slender neck, and a strangely corpulent body with wide hips and almost feminine curves. This was likely less a realistic portrait and more a symbolic one, representing the androgynous, life-giving nature of the Aten, who was the mother and father of all creation. The enormous ear studs accentuated this alien elegance, elongating the head and drawing attention to the king's listening, attentive posture toward his god. The choice to emphasize the ears was profoundly intentional. In Akhenaten's new theological order, the relationship with the divine was more direct and personal. The Aten did not communicate through a hidden pantheon of animal-headed gods in dark temple sanctuaries. The god was the visible, physical sun, whose rays, depicted as ending in tiny hands, bestowed the ankh, or symbol of life, directly upon the royal family. In this context, the king's enlarged ears symbolized his role as the sole conduit for the Aten's blessings. He was listening to the god, and in turn, the people were to listen to him. These bizarre ear ornaments were a physical declaration that the pharaoh was always open, always receptive to the will of the Aten, ready to receive divine instruction and channel it to the people. They transformed a piece of body jewelry into a powerful symbol of a revolutionary and exclusive access to the divine. Yet even as Akhenaten's revolutionary ear studs proclaimed a new and exclusive connection to the divine, the royal workshops of Amarna were also producing objects of an entirely different character, pieces that spoke not of a distant, singular god, but of the tender, earthly bonds of family. In the tomb made for these same royal children, we find some of the most delicate and poignant jewelry from all of antiquity, the exquisite gold and silver diadems of the young princesses. These were not the heavy, symbolic regalia of state power. They were intimate tokens of youth, beauty, and a cherished place within a most unusual royal household. Imagine the delicate touch of a craftsman's hand, carefully weaving together the most precious of metals to create a circlet light enough for a child. These diadems are masterclasses in subtlety and grace. The base was often formed from a slender band of silver, a metal the Egyptians called white gold, which was actually rarer and sometimes more highly prized than gold itself due to the scarcity of native silver sources. Upon this silvery canvas, the jewelers would solder the most intricate filigree work in the finest gold wire, creating a stunning contrast between the cool sheen of the silver and the warm, solar glow of the gold. The overall effect was one of ethereal lightness, as if the diadem were woven from sunlight and moonlight itself. The motifs chosen were perfectly suited to their young wearers. Instead of intimidating vultures or scarabs, the designs were overwhelmingly floral, celebrating the natural world and the idea of blossoming youth. Tiny golden petals and rosettes formed delicate patterns, alongside gracefully curving tendrils and leaves that seemed to sway with an unseen breeze. In the center of one particularly beautiful diadem, a perfect golden mandrake fruit takes prominence. This was not a random choice. The mandrake was deeply associated with love and fertility in the ancient world, but its use here, for a young princess, speaks more to its protective qualities and its connection to ensuring a strong and healthy lineage. It is a wish for a fruitful future, embodied in a single, shimmering jewel. These fragile circlets were far more than simple decorations. In the context of the Amarna court, they served as clear markers of identity and status. Each princess would have worn her diadem, and the subtle variations in design likely denoted her specific rank among her sisters. They visually reinforced their position as the beloved daughters of the living god, Akhenaten, and his great royal wife, Nefertiti. We can picture them wearing these light, elegant bands during intimate family scenes depicted on the walls of their palaces, perhaps while receiving the life-giving rays of the Aten alongside their parents. The diadems set them apart, not as fearsome deities, but as the youthful, blossoming fruit of the royal couple's divine union. Ultimately, these objects are heartbreaking in their beauty because they are so personal. They were not made for the public eye or for grand ceremonies of state. They were private family jewels. When we look at them today, we are not just seeing the skill of an ancient goldsmith, we are glimpsing the love of a parent for a child. The care taken in their construction, the choice of motifs celebrating growth and purity, all point to a desire to adorn these young lives with beauty and to mark their place in a world that, for all its revolutionary strangeness, still cherished the innocence of youth. They are a quiet, gentle counterpoint to the overwhelming political and religious upheaval of the period, a reminder that even in the most extraordinary of times, the most human of emotions, a parent's love for their child finds a way to express itself in gold and silver. Yet even amidst the intimate family moments of Amarna, the role of royal jewelry often returned to themes of power, protection, and prestige, a tradition magnificently embodied by a seemingly simple object from an earlier, turbulent time, the fish pendant of Queen Ahhotep. Discovered within her elaborate burial assemblage, this piece stands out not for its immense size or overwhelming weight of gold, but for its elegant form and the profound, layered story it tells about a queen who is far more than just a king's mother. She was a military leader, a regent, and a unifying force during a critical period of Egyptian history, and her jewelry reflects that powerful legacy in stunning detail. Crafted during the New Kingdom's early 18th dynasty, the pendant is a masterwork of the jeweler's art. It takes the form of a tilapia fish, rendered with a beautiful, lifelike accuracy that shows the artist's keen observation of the natural world. The body is formed from a single sheet of hammered gold, meticulously shaped to capture the creature's distinct silhouette, the rounded head, the gracefully curving back, and the delicate fan of the tail. But it is the inlay work that truly brings this piece to life. The body of the fish is not left as a plain golden sheet, it is a canvas for color and symbolism. Artisans carefully set it with intricate cloisonné, creating compartments with fine gold wire that were then filled with vibrant bands of lapis lazuli and turquoise. The effect is a shimmering, scaled skin that seems to capture the very essence of the fish glinting just beneath the water's surface, a perfect marriage of naturalistic form and brilliant, symbolic color. The choice of a fish was far from arbitrary. In the rich, symbolic language of ancient Egypt, the tilapia held two powerful and complementary meanings. First, it was a potent symbol of fertility and rebirth. Egyptians observed how the female tilapia would safely carry her fertilized eggs in her mouth until the fry were ready to hatch, a breathtaking act of maternal protection that made the fish a natural emblem of new life and successful regeneration. For a queen like Ahhotep, who herself was the mother of kings, this symbolism would have been deeply personal, representing her role in nurturing and safeguarding the royal lineage. But the tilapia had a second, more unexpected meaning. Because of its habit of fiercely defending its young, it was also seen as a symbol of protection against drowning and chaos in the watery depths. Wearing this amulet was like carrying a personal shield, a charm to ward off the unseen dangers of both the physical and spiritual worlds. However, to view this pendant solely through a lens of fertility and protection is to miss its most dramatic historical context. Queen Ahhotep lived during a pivotal moment, a time when Egypt was finally expelling the foreign Hyksos rulers who had dominated the northern part of the country. Historical accounts and inscriptions suggest she acted as regent for her young son, Ahmose, the founder of the 18th dynasty, while he was too young to rule. But she was no mere placeholder. A large ceremonial axe and a dagger found in her tomb, both inscribed with the name of her son Ahmose, were almost certainly honorific gifts presented to her. An inscription on a stela erected by Ahmose himself praises her for having rallied her Egyptians, she having guarded them, and having brought back her fugitives, and having collected her deserters. This is the language of a military strategist and a unifying leader. She didn't just hold the throne, she actively secured it. In this light, the fish pendant transforms from a personal amulet into a potent political statement. The act of rallying Egyptians and bringing back fugitives could easily be metaphorically linked to the protective, gathering nature of the tilapia. More importantly, by accepting and wearing such military honors incorporated into her personal jewelry, Ahhotep was making a bold declaration. She was visually blending the traditionally feminine symbols of fertility and protection with the overtly masculine symbols of military power and authority. This small golden fish becomes a unique and powerful artifact, a single piece of jewelry that speaks to the complete role of a queen as a life-giver, a protector of her people, and a decisive leader in a time of war. It honors not just her role as a mother, but her crucial achievements in helping to forge the very dynasty that would launch Egypt into its golden age. While the diadems of Amarna spoke of youthful innocence and the fish pendant of Ahhotep embodied martial resolve, one piece of royal jewelry stands apart as perhaps the single most breathtaking example of ancient Egyptian goldsmithing ever unearthed, the spectacular broad collar of Pharaoh Susens I. Discovered not in the famous Valley of the Kings, but within the silver-rich tombs of Tanis, this collar is the crown jewel of a treasure that rivaled even that of Tutankhamun. Its discovery in 1939 by French archaeologist Pierre Montet was a moment of pure, unadulterated awe, revealing a king whose wealth in precious metals was so immense it defies belief, and a piece of funerary art so perfect it seems touched by the gods themselves. Crafted during the 21st dynasty, a period often misunderstood as a time of decline, this collar shatters all preconceptions. To behold it is to understand the absolute pinnacle of the jeweler's craft. It is fashioned from row upon row of meticulously shaped tubular beads, each one a tiny cylinder of the purest, most radiant gold imaginable. These are not simply strung together, they are organized in a flawless, graduated pattern, creating a sweeping semicircle designed to drape heavily across the king's chest and shoulders. But the gold alone is not what creates its mesmerizing effect. Interspersed between these rows of solar metal are equally precise beads carved from the deepest, most celestial blue lapis lazuli, a stone imported from distant Afghanistan that represented the night sky and the abode of the gods. The contrast is deliberate and symbolic, a harmonious union of the golden sun and the star-filled heavens, a miniature cosmos meant to be worn by a divine king. The terminals, the parts that would have hung down over the king's back, are where the artisan's virtuosity reaches its peak. These are not simple loops or clasps, they are masterpieces in their own right. They take the form of solid gold hawk heads, exquisitely detailed with feathers textured into the metal, and eyes that were once surely inlaid with obsidian or glass to give them a piercing, lifelike gaze. The falcon was the sacred embodiment of the god Horus, the divine protector of kingship. By placing these powerful symbols at the rear of the collar, the design ensured that even from behind, the pharaoh was under the vigilant guard of a celestial guardian. This level of symbolic intention, where every single component from the largest bead to the smallest detail serves a dual purpose of beauty and belief, is what sets this piece in a class of its own. In terms of sheer opulence and material wealth, the Tanis collar stands virtually unrivaled. While the collar of Senebtisi was beautiful for its intricate faience and carnelian work, and those found on Tutankhamun were magnificent in their own right, Susen's piece is on another scale entirely. His was a treasure built on silver and gold, not just gold and gemstones. The Tanis Delta region provided this dynasty with access to unprecedented wealth in precious metals, and this collar is a bold declaration of that power. The weight of the gold alone is staggering, speaking of a control over resources that was the envy of the ancient world. The craftsmanship is also notably more refined and systematic than earlier examples. The beads are more uniform, the patterns more mathematically precise, showing an evolution in technique that prioritized a flawless, almost industrial perfection, all in the service of creating an object of unimaginable luxury. Yet, for all its staggering material value, its true purpose was profoundly spiritual. This magnificent object was created for one reason, and one reason only, to be placed on the neck of the mummified king for all eternity. It was a key component of his resurrection outfit. In the perilous journey through the underworld, the broad collar, or wesek, served as a potent amulet. Its heavy, encompassing presence was believed to magically protect the vulnerable neck of the deceased, the passage for breath and life, from any demon or evil force that might seek to strangle his spirit and prevent his rebirth. It shielded his essence, furthermore, by adorning himself with this representation of the cosmic order, the sun and the sky in perfect balance. Susens was aligning himself with the fundamental principle of Maat, or divine order. He was presenting himself to the gods not merely as a wealthy man, but as a righteous ruler who upheld the balance of the universe, making him worthy of joining them in the afterlife. The collar was his final, dazzling argument for immortality, a last testament crafted in gold and lapis lazuli that declared his soul was prepared, protected, and destined for eternal glory among the stars. But for all the breathtaking opulence of solid gold and celestial iron, some of the most spiritually significant materials in the royal jewelry box were not mined from the earth or fallen from the sky. They were invented in the workshop. This brings us to one of ancient Egypt's most ingenious and beloved creations, faience. To call it simply glazed ceramic is to vastly undersell its magic. The Egyptians knew it as Tijahanet, which means that which is dazzling or brilliant, and it was this radiant, otherworldly shimmer that made it a staple in the tombs of pharaohs and commoners alike, a material as rich in meaning as it was accessible to craft. The process of making faience was a kind of early alchemy, transforming humble, earthly ingredients into a substance that mimicked the most precious gems. At its core, it was a mixture of crushed quartz or sand, a small amount of lime, and a mineral-based alkali, such as natron, the same salt used in mummification. This paste was then molded by hand or pressed into molds to create everything from tiny bead discs to elaborate amulets and inlay tiles, but the true transformation happened in the kiln. As it fired, the ingredients would migrate to the surface, forming a glossy, glass-like glaze that was typically a stunning, saturated turquoise, blue, or deep green, though other colors like brilliant white, violet, or even black were also possible. The result was an object that didn't just have color on its surface. The color was an intrinsic part of its being, a brilliant skin that captured and reflected light in a way that seemed alive. This dazzling blue-green hue was the key to its immense symbolic power. For the Egyptians, this color was not merely decorative, it was the very color of life itself. It evoked the fertile, life-giving waters of the Nile River as it spilled over its banks, the lush papyrus reeds that grew along its edge, and the vibrant plumage of the sacred ibis. Most importantly, it was the color of the heavens. Turquoise blue was associated with the divine realm and was a color sacred to the goddess Hathor, the deity of joy, beauty, and motherhood. By wearing faience, a person was literally cloaking themselves in these powerful concepts of fertility, joy, and cosmic order. It was a material that symbolized creation and resurrection, making it the perfect medium for funerary jewelry intended to ensure rebirth in the afterlife. This profound spiritual importance is why we find faience in such abundance in royal tombs, right alongside solid gold and lapis lazuli. It was never considered a cheap imitation, it was a potent symbolic substance in its own right. Pharaohs were buried with broad collars made entirely of thousands of faience beads, their bodies glistening with the color of new life. Elaborate nets made of faience cylinder beads were draped over mummies, intended as a magical web of protection. But some of the most poignant examples are the smallest, the amulets, tiny, mold-pressed faience figures of gods like Bes, the protector of the household, or Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess of childbirth, were sewn into the mummy wrappings. Scarab amulets, the ultimate symbol of transformation, were mass-produced in faience, making this powerful magic accessible for the journey to the afterlife. A noblewoman might not have a solid gold scarab, but she could certainly have one in brilliant blue faience that was considered just as magically effective. And this points to the final, beautiful paradox of faience. While its meaning was as deep as any precious metal, its nature was democratizing. Unlike gold, which was controlled by the palace and the temples, or lapis lazuli, which had to be imported from thousands of miles away, the ingredients for faience were readily available throughout Egypt. This meant that everyone, from the highest pharaoh to the most humble farmer, could own a piece of this dazzling, magical material. A king's broad collar might feature rows of gold and genuine lapis, but it would almost certainly be punctuated with vibrant faience elements to harness its specific color magic. A commoner's burial might contain a single, simple faience amulet of a protective eye. In both cases, the material served the same purpose: to provide a dazzling, protective shell of color that promised renewal and safe passage. It was a testament to the Egyptian belief that the hope for eternal life, and the tools to achieve it, should be available to all, shining brilliantly in the dark. Among the most striking and unconventional honors ever conceived, the golden fly necklaces stand out as a testament to a culture that valued courage above all else. Imagine a prestigious award not in the shape of a star or a cross, but of a common insect, meticulously crafted in pure gold and strung together to be worn as a chattering, gleaming collar of valor. These were not merely decorative pieces, they were some of the earliest known military decorations in history, bestowed personally by the pharaoh upon soldiers and officials who had demonstrated exceptional bravery on the field of battle. The flies themselves were surprisingly substantial, each one crafted from heavy, beaten gold and designed with a startling degree of realism. Artisans would carefully shape the bodies, often adding delicate details like segmented legs and even tiny wings, sometimes rendered in a different alloy to create a contrasting color. These individual pendants, typically numbering 3 to 6 in a single strand, were then strung on a thick, flexible wire or a strong cord of linen, creating a necklace that would have rested heavily on the chest of the recipient. The effect when worn would have been both dazzling and unmistakably distinctive. Unlike the smooth, polished surfaces of ceremonial collars, a necklace of golden flies would have moved and shifted with the wearer, the individual pendants clinking softly together, an audible and visible reminder of the martial prowess it represented. The choice of a fly as the symbol for this highest military honor seems bizarre to the modern mind, but to the ancient Egyptians, it was profoundly logical. They observed the common fly with a sense of grudging respect for its persistent, relentless, and fearless nature. A fly cannot be easily swatted away, it returns again and again, bothering its target with an unstoppable tenacity. For a warrior on the battlefield, these were the ideal qualities: the courage to persistently attack the enemy, to press forward without retreat, and to harass the opposition with unwavering determination. To be buzzing around the enemy lines, causing constant disruption, was the behavior of a truly brave soldier. By awarding a golden fly, the pharaoh was recognizing not just a single act of heroism, but this very quality of aggressive, persistent courage that could turn the tide of a battle. We have several magnificent surviving examples, but none more famous than those found in the tomb of Queen Ahhotep, the mother of the founding pharaohs of the New Kingdom. Within her burial cache, archaeologists discovered no fewer than 3 such fly necklaces, along with other military honors like ceremonial axes and a dagger. This discovery paints a vivid picture of her critical role. The inscriptions on these artifacts suggest they were awarded to her by her son, Ahmose, for her actions in helping to expel the Hyksos invaders. One inscription explicitly praises her for rallying Egypt's armies and safeguarding the nation. These golden flies were not just posthumous gifts, they were likely presented to her in a grand ceremony, a public acknowledgement that this queen had possessed the fearless, persistent spirit of a warrior, playing a crucial role in the military victory that launched Egypt's Golden Age. For the officials and soldiers who received them, these necklaces were far more than valuable metal. They were a transformative symbol of status and identity. Wearing such an award granted the bearer immense social capital, marking them as an individual who had been personally recognized by the god king himself for their valor. It was a public declaration that they had proven their worth in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. This visible token of bravery likely translated into promotions, land grants, and a place of high honor within the court and military hierarchy. The golden flies were a conversation starter, a piece of biography worn around the neck that commanded respect and told a story of survival and skill without the wearer ever having to say a word. Ultimately, these unusual awards reveal a sophisticated understanding of psychology and leadership within ancient Egyptian culture. The pharaohs, by instituting such a distinctive and tangible reward, were actively fostering a culture of military excellence. The promise of such a unique and prestigious honor would have motivated soldiers to acts of great courage, fueling the army's overall effectiveness. It was a brilliant system of incentive that recognized the human desire for recognition, blending material wealth with immense social prestige. The golden fly necklace stands as a powerful reminder that for the Egyptians, true honor was not found in passive wealth, but in action, in the relentless, fearless, and buzzing persistence of a warrior who would not be swatted away. Yet for all the martial symbolism of golden flies and the cosmic significance of broad collars, perhaps the most personal and potent symbol of a pharaoh's identity was one that could be worn on the hand, the cartouche ring. Unlike the ceremonial regalia reserved for state occasions, these rings were a constant, intimate declaration of royal power, a wearable signature that fused the divine with the daily life of the king. Imagine a pharaoh extending his hand, not just to issue a command, but to reveal his very name encircled and protected within the sacred oval of a cartouche, rendered in the most precious materials on earth. The design of these rings was both elegant and deeply symbolic. They typically took the form of a swivel bezel, a masterpiece of ancient engineering. A heavy, often hollow signet was meticulously carved or cast, then mounted on a wire that passed through its center, allowing it to pivot freely on a solid gold band that encircled the finger. This ingenious design meant the heavy seal could be worn comfortably, its weight balanced, and easily rotated into position for use. The face of this bezel was the entire point of the piece. Here, within the protective loop of the cartouche, a rope-like oval that symbolized the pharaoh's dominion over all that the sun encircled, the king's throne name or birth name was inscribed in beautifully rendered hieroglyphs. These weren't mere letters, they were tiny pictures of power, often flanked by protective symbols like the ankh or the eye of Horus. The materials were always the finest. The bezel itself was crafted from the purest gold, or sometimes even silver, while the hieroglyphs of the name were frequently inlaid with vibrant contrasting materials like deep blue lapis lazuli or fiery red carnelian, making the royal name literally shine with the colors of the gods. This was far more than a piece of jewelry. It was the ultimate tool of state authority. In an era before digital signatures or official letterhead, the cartouche ring was the pharaoh's personal seal. A royal scribe would hold a lump of soft clay against the string tying a papyrus document closed, and the king would press his ring firmly into it. The resulting impression would leave a raised, mirror image of his name and titles, authenticating the decree, treaty, or land grant as coming directly from the divine ruler himself. This act was not just administrative, it was a magical one. Each time the ring was pressed into the clay, it was a reenactment of creation itself, stamping the king's identity and will into existence, much like a god speaking the world into being. It made his authority tangible, portable, and utterly undeniable. A document bearing this seal carried the full weight of the crown and the mandate of heaven. But the ring's power extended beyond the royal archives and into the very spiritual identity of the king. The ancient Egyptians believed that a person's name, or ren, was a crucial component of their soul, a vital force that had to be preserved and protected for them to exist in the afterlife. To erase a name was to condemn someone to a second, final death. The cartouche, by encircling the royal name, acted as a powerful magical barrier, shielding this most essential part of the pharaoh's being from chaos, forgetfulness, or malicious magic. To wear this ring was to constantly safeguard one's own soul, to carry a personal amulet of immortality that proclaimed, "I exist, and I shall continue to exist forever." This profound belief explains why pharaohs went to such great lengths to have their names and cartouches carved into temple walls, obelisks, and statues. It was a campaign of eternal preservation, and the ring was its most personal expression. We see this intimate connection between ruler and ring in some of history's most famous artifacts. The tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun contained a magnificent collection of these rings, each one a miniature proclamation of his restored kingship after the turbulent Amarna period. One particularly fine example features his throne name, Nebkipparir, inscribed within the cartouche. Another stunning piece pairs his cartouche with that of his queen, Akhenaten, symbolizing their joint rule and the divine harmony of their union. These rings were not left unused. Many show clear signs of wear and the tiny abrasive marks of being pressed into clay time and again. They were working jewels, integral to the daily function of the monarchy. From authenticating a missive to a foreign power to approving the inventory of a temple warehouse, the cartouche ring was there, a constant, gleaming extension of the pharaoh's will, ensuring that his name and, through it, his legacy and his very soul would endure long after he had passed into the realm of the gods. Yet amidst the glittering gold and shimmering faience, one color held a particularly sacred place in the Egyptian palette, a color so vital that pharaohs would launch entire expeditions to secure it, the celestial blue-green of genuine turquoise. This was not a stone that could be easily found in the Nile Valley. It had to be quested for, mined from the harsh and unforgiving mountains of the Sinai Peninsula in an operation of staggering scale and danger. The Egyptians called these remote desert mines mefkat, a word that evokes the very essence of loveliness and light, and the journey to reach them was a testament to how deeply they valued this particular gem. Venturing into the sign was not for the faint of heart. It meant organizing massive, state-sponsored expeditions comprising hundreds of miners, soldiers, scribes, and artisans. They would traverse hundreds of miles of blistering desert, navigating by the stars and relying on a chain of way stations that had been dug into the rock to store precious water. Once they reached the site, like the famous mines at Sarabat el-Khadim, the real work began. Using stone hammers and fire-setting techniques, Heating the rock with fire and then dousing it with water to cause it to fracture, they would painstakingly tunnel deep into the mountainside. The conditions were brutal, the risk of collapse constant, and the reward was a vein of rough, cloudy blue stone that would need to be carefully carved and polished to reveal its inner radiance. That the pharaohs repeatedly invested such immense resources into these missions speaks volumes about turquoise's worth, which was measured not just in its beauty, but in its direct connection to the divine. This connection was personified by the goddess Hathor, the powerful deity of love, beauty, music, and motherhood. She was revered as the mistress of turquoise and the Lady of Macehead. A magnificent temple was built in her honor right at the heart of the mining operations at Sarabat el-Khadim, a place where miners and officials could offer prayers and gifts for her protection and favor before descending into the dangerous depths. They believed the turquoise itself was a physical manifestation of her presence, a piece of her divine essence solidified within the rock, to where turquoise was to be under the direct protection of this beloved goddess, to carry a piece of her joyful, life-affirming power on one's body. Inscriptions at the site often thank Hathor for revealing a rich vein of the stone, framing a successful mining season not as an industrial achievement, but as a divine blessing from the Lady of the Mountain. This potent blend of beauty and spiritual power made turquoise an irresistible material for royal jewelers. It was used in its most perfect, polished cabochon form to create breathtaking inlay work. Picture a golden pectoral, its surface an intricate scene of a pharaoh smiting his enemies. The figure of the king might be rendered in gold, but the details, the stripes of his Neem's headcloth, the feathers on a protective vulture's wing, would be picked out in vibrant turquoise and deep red carnelian, creating a stunning visual contrast. It was also a favorite for creating the elaborate beaded nets that were draped over the wrapped bodies of mummies. These nets, often consisting of thousands of individually drilled turquoise beads alternating with gold or faience, were believed to act as a magical web, a shroud of protection that trapped malevolent forces and shielded the vulnerable spirit within. But perhaps its most personal and powerful use was in the creation of amuletic jewelry designed specifically for protection in life and death. Broad collars for both royalty and the elite very often featured rows of tubular turquoise beads alongside gold and cornflower, blue lapis lazuli. A noblewoman might be buried with bracelets and anklets made of alternating gold and turquoise beads, ensuring she would enter the afterlife adorned in the color of life and joy. The most significant amulets, like the protective eye of Horus or the jed pillar of stability, were frequently carved from this stone, harnessing its inherent connection to Hathor's power to maximize their magical effectiveness. In this way, turquoise was far more than a decorative accent. It was a functional, spiritual component, a direct line to a goddess whose favor could mean the difference between eternal bliss and oblivion. And woven into the very fabric of royal life, intimate and close to the body, were objects that celebrated not just power in the afterlife, but the very power of life itself. Among these, few pieces are as evocative and symbolically rich as the ceremonial girdles dedicated to the goddess Hathor. Discovered in the tombs of royal women and high-status nobles, these were not mere belts for holding up garments. They were intricate masterpieces of linked gold, designed to encircle the hips and waist, serving as a shimmering, jingling testament to fertility, divine protection, and elevated status. The construction of these girdles was a marvel of the goldsmith's patience and skill. Picture not a single, solid band of metal, but a flexible, cascading curtain of thousands of individually crafted links. Each link was a tiny work of art, often shaped like a delicate ring or a bead, meticulously soldered together to form a chain of immense length and luxurious weight. But the true genius of their design lay in the pendants that dangled from this golden foundation. Among the most common and significant motifs was the cowrie shell, rendered not in porcelain, but in solid, gleaming gold. The goldsmiths would capture the shell's distinctive elongated form, its slit-like opening, and even its textured surface with astonishing realism. As the wearer moved, these golden shells would have swayed and clicked gently together, creating a soft, rhythmic music that was an integral part of the girdle's power and presence. The choice of the cowrie shell was profoundly deliberate, speaking a universal language of fertility that resonates even today. Its shape closely resembles the external female anatomy, making it one of the oldest and most widespread symbols of generative power, womb protection, and sexual vitality across countless ancient cultures. For the Egyptians, to wear a girdle shimmering with these golden shells was to actively harness this potent energy. It was a declaration of a woman's life-giving potential, a magical adornment intended to ensure her ability to bear children, preferably strong sons who would continue the royal lineage. In a society where the health and fertility of the royal women were directly tied to the stability and future of the kingdom itself, such objects were not merely personal, they were matters of state importance. This powerful symbolism was inextricably linked to the goddess Hathor, the mistress of turquoise, the divine mother, and the embodiment of love, joy, and feminine power. Hathor was often invoked as a protective force during childbirth and was seen as a nurturing guardian of women. By dedicating these girdles to her, either through inscriptions or simply through their symbolic language, the wearer was placing herself under the goddess's direct patronage. The girdle became a sacred tool, a physical prayer for Hathor's blessing. It was believed to protect the wearer from evil spirits that might cause infertility or harm during pregnancy, acting as a magical barrier that safeguarded the most vulnerable and vital center of a woman's body. We can imagine these magnificent pieces being worn during key religious ceremonies dedicated to Hathor, where music, dance, and the shaking of sacred sistrum rattles were used to invoke the goddess's joyful presence. A priestess or queen, adorned in her golden girdle, would have been a central figure in these rituals, her movements accentuated by the swaying, clicking shells, her entire being resonating with the energy of the divine feminine. The girdle transformed her into a living embodiment of Hathor's principles on earth, yet beyond the temple, these girdles were also powerful, undeniable symbols of social and economic status. The sheer amount of gold and the incredible labor required to produce just one made them inaccessible to all but the most elite. A woman wearing such a piece was announcing her privileged position within the royal court or the highest echelons of the priesthood. It was a public display of wealth and influence that was both beautiful and intimidating. Furthermore, many of these girdles were discovered not in a jewelry box, but placed directly on the mummified body within the tomb. This final act underscores their ultimate purpose, to ensure the deceased woman's fertility and protective power were not extinguished by death, but would be reborn with her in the afterlife, allowing her to continue her vital role for all eternity. And yet, for all the grand pectorals and ceremonial crowns, some of the most hauntingly personal treasures were designed for the body's very extremities. When Howard Carter first gazed upon the mummy of Tutankhamun, he found the young king sheathed in gold from head to toe, but it was the details at the very end of those linen-wrapped limbs that were so strikingly intimate, the solid gold covers meticulously fashioned to sheath each of his fingers and toes. These were not merely decorative sheaths, they were intricate gold stalls, and they represent one of the most fascinating and peculiar aspects of Egyptian funerary practice, a profound commitment to preserving the physical self for all eternity. The craftsmanship of these stalls is a testament to the jeweler's obsessive attention to detail. Each one was not a simple, hollow tube of metal. They were individually sculpted to mimic the exact shape and proportions of Tutankhamun's own digits, suggesting they were likely custom-made from a cast taken during the mummification process. The fingernails and toenails were rendered with exquisite care, perfectly shaped and often inlaid with a contrasting material to mimic the natural lunula, the pale half-moon at the nail's base. Some were even detailed with delicate cuticle lines, a level of realism that is both astonishing and deeply moving. They were crafted from heavy, beaten sheet gold, and for the fingers, they extended to cover most of the digit, almost like elegant, seamless thimbles of the purest metal. Their purpose was deeply rooted in the core Egyptian belief of bodily integrity for the afterlife. The journey to the field of reeds was perilous, and the soul, or Ba, needed a complete and intact physical vessel, the Ka, to return to. The Egyptians went to extraordinary lengths to preserve the body through mummification, but they also understood its fragility. The extremities, the fingers and toes, were particularly vulnerable to damage, decay, or even accidental breakage during the lengthy wrapping process. Losing a part of the physical self was tantamount to being incomplete in the next world, which could prevent a successful resurrection. These golden stalls acted as an imperishable, divine armor for these vulnerable parts. They guaranteed that when Tutankhamun awoke in the afterlife, he would be whole, able to grasp offerings, wield tools, and walk confidently into eternity. They were the ultimate insurance against physical loss. There is also a potent layer of symbolic magic at work. Gold was not just a precious metal, it was the flesh of the gods, a substance believed to be divine and incorruptible. By encasing his fingers and toes in this material, the pharaoh wasn't just protecting his body, he was transforming it. He was replacing the frail, perishable parts of his human form with the eternal, shining substance of divinity. This process was a physical manifestation of his transformation from a mortal king into an eternal, god-like being, an ankh, a glorified spirit. The act of sheathing each digit was a meticulous, ritualistic step in this rebirth, ensuring every part of him met the divine standard. The modern discovery of these objects adds an undeniably eerie dimension to their story. For archaeologists like Carter, carefully unwrapping the mummy layer by layer, the revelation of these gleaming gold covers at the end of the darkened, resin-stained linen must have been a breathtaking and slightly unnerving moment. It creates a powerful image, the slow unveiling of a human form, only to find these dazzling, metallic extensions where flesh and nail were expected. This juxtaposition of the familiar human shape with the cold, brilliant sheen of gold is what makes these artifacts so uniquely fascinating. They are a perfect and somewhat unsettling symbol of the ancient Egyptian mind, a blend of the deeply practical, the profoundly spiritual, and the utterly determined to conquer death itself, one golden fingertip at a time. Yet for all the divine symbolism cast in gold and faience, one material held such a celestial allure that the pharaohs were willing to move mountains, or rather, cross them, to possess it. To secure the deep, midnight blue of lapis lazuli, Egyptian merchants and miners embarked on one of the ancient world's most daring and protracted quests, traversing over 1,200 miles of some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth to reach the remote mines of the Hindu Kush in what is now modern-day Afghanistan. This was not a casual trade route, it was a monumental logistical operation, a testament to the immense value placed on a stone that was seen not as a mere mineral, but as a physical piece of the night sky itself. The journey to obtain this treasure was an epic feat of endurance and organization. Caravans laden with Egyptian gold, papyrus, and linen would set out, likely following the Nile north before cutting east across the Sinai Peninsula. From there, they faced the vast emptiness of the Arabian deserts, relying on nomadic tribes for guidance and water. The final, most perilous leg involved navigating the high mountain passes of the Iranian plateau and into the rugged valleys of Afghanistan, a journey that could take the better part of a year to complete. The mines themselves, at sites like Sar-e-Sang, were places of brutal labor, using primitive tools and fire-setting techniques. miners would tunnel deep into the mountainside to extract the rough, marble-veined rock. The sheer human cost and economic investment required to bring even a small quantity of this stone back to the Nile Valley meant that lapis lazuli was, weight for weight, more valuable than gold itself in ancient Egypt. Its presence in a pharaoh's tomb was a powerful declaration of his wealth, his reach, and his divine right to command the resources of the entire world. Once this rough, dusty blue rock arrived in the royal workshops, the true magic began. Skilled craftsmen, likely working under the strict supervision of the priesthood, would set to work with copper tools and abrasive sand to reveal the heaven within the stone. They would carefully cut and polish it into tiny, perfect tiles for inlay work, or carve it into elegant beads, amulets, and scarabs. The goal was always to maximize the stone's most prized feature, its intense, uniform blue color, often speckled with brilliant, pyrite inclusions that shimmered like tiny, captured stars. This specific deep blue was unlike anything else in the natural world. To the Egyptian mind, it was the only substance on earth that perfectly mirrored the vault of the night sky, that dark, infinite blue where the gods resided and the celestial bodies journeyed after dark. It was the color of the abode of the gods, making lapis quite literally a piece of the divine realm that could be held in the hand. This profound association is why we find lapis lazuli used so prominently in the most significant royal regalia, particularly in objects designed to facilitate the pharaoh's journey to the afterlife. Grand pectorals like the one worn by Susannes I are magnificent symphonies of gold and lapis, the solar metal and the celestial stone united on the king's chest. The intricate gold framework of a vulture headdress would be brought to life with countless inlays of this sky blue stone, transforming the queen who wore it into a living embodiment of the protective goddess Nekhbit, whose wings were the very firmament. Even the fingers of a royal statue might be inlaid with lapis, ensuring that every gesture made by the god-king's effigy was connected to the divine. Perhaps the most powerful use of all was in the burial mask, the ultimate representation of the transfigured, divine pharaoh. The most famous example, of course, is the mask of Tutankhamun. While its primary material is solid gold, the stripes of the Nemes headdress, the eyebrows, and the signature kohl eyeliner are all rendered in brilliant blue glass, a material specifically engineered and colored to imitate the unobtainable perfection of lapis lazuli. For those who could afford the real thing, however, nothing else would suffice. To encase the head of the mummy in a mask adorned with genuine lapis was to completely transform the king's identity. His head, the seat of his senses and his intelligence, was now sheathed in the substance of the heavens. He was no longer of the earth. He was a celestial being, ready to take his place among the imperishable stars, forever protected by the deep blue night from which he came and to which he would now return for eternity. But of all the magnificent collars placed upon the king, one stands apart not just for its beauty, but for its form, the breathtaking golden vulture collar, a piece of funerary art so specific in its design and intention that it transcends mere adornment to become a guardian in solid form. Discovered nestled among the layers of linen within Tutankhamun's innermost coffin, this piece is not a necklace of strung beads, but a single, sculpted masterpiece. It presents the body of the vulture goddess Nekhbit with her wings outstretched in a perpetual, protective embrace, crafted to drape across the king's chest as if the deity herself had alighted there to shield him for all eternity. The craftsmanship is nothing short of sublime. The vulture's body and expansive wings are fashioned from the finest sheet gold, hammered to a feathery thinness yet detailed with an almost microscopic precision. Each individual feather on the wings is meticulously engraved, creating a texture so realistic you can almost feel the softness and strength of the bird's plumage. This golden form is then brought to vibrant life through the magic of inlay. The feathers are not merely etched, They are outlined and accentuated with delicate cloisonné wires filled with contrasting semi-precious stones. Imagine the deep, cosmic blue of lapis lazuli defining the longer flight feathers, the vibrant turquoise of faience suggesting the coverts, and the fiery red of carnelian adding brilliant accents, perhaps mimicking the glint of the sun on a golden beak or talon. The head of the vulture, projecting forward from the chest, is a sculpture in itself, likely inlaid with obsidian eyes that would have held a piercing, lifelike gaze, making the entire piece seem alert and alive with divine power. This specific choice of a vulture was profoundly intentional and would have been instantly understood by any ancient Egyptian. The creature is the living incarnation of the goddess Nekhbet, the ancient patron deity of Upper Egypt. She was known as the Great White One of Nekhbet, and her role was not one of menace, but of fierce maternal protection. Egyptians observed how the vulture was an incredibly devoted parent, relentlessly protective of its young, and they channeled that powerful nurturing instinct into a national symbol. The outstretched wings of the bird were the ultimate emblem of shelter, a divine promise that the wearer was under the direct and constant guard of this celestial mother. For Tutankhamun, placed upon his mummy, this collar's function was entirely spiritual and practical. Its placement was crucial. It was positioned so that the vulture's body covered his upper chest and throat, with the wings stretching over his shoulders. In the Egyptian belief system, the throat was a particularly vulnerable point, the passage for breath and life, and therefore a target for malevolent forces seeking to strangle the soul and prevent its resurrection. The solid, physical presence of the golden vulture acted as an imperishable shield, a piece of armor for the afterlife that no demon could penetrate. It was a permanent magical ward against the suffocating chaos of the underworld. Furthermore, by incorporating this symbol of Upper Egypt, the collar also made a potent political statement that was vital for the young king. Tutankhamun came to the throne after the turbulent Amarna period, a time when his father, Akhenaten, had disrupted the traditional religious order. Part of Tutankhamun's core mission was to restore the old gods and reunify the two lands of Egypt. Wearing the vulture of Upper Egypt was a clear declaration of a return to tradition, a reaffirmation of his rightful rule over that half of the kingdom, and his devotion to the pantheon his father had briefly abandoned. It signaled that divine order was restored. Ultimately, this magnificent object was far more than jewelry. It was a functional device for immortality. It wasn't meant to be seen by the living after the burial rites were complete. Its sole audience was the gods and the demons of the underworld. When the priests laid this golden vulture upon the king's breast, they were performing a final, powerful act of magic. They were invoking Nekhbet, binding her protective essence to the king's mummy, and ensuring that the boy Pharaoh, who may have felt vulnerable in life, would journey through death with the mightiest of protectors at his side, her wings forever outstretched, guarding his heart and his soul on their path to eternity. While we sadly lack the physical discovery of Nefertiti's tomb and its treasures, the stone walls of Amarna provide us with an incredibly detailed catalog of the jewelry she would have possessed, particularly the magnificent broad collars that were central to her iconic image. In the countless reliefs and statues that survived the attempted erasure of this period, Nefertiti is almost always depicted adorned with collars of such staggering complexity and size that they must have been masterworks of the goldsmith's art, designed to visually declare her revolutionary role as a near-equal co-regent with her husband, Akhenaten. Based on these artistic representations, the collars that would have rested upon her shoulders were likely constructed from an immense number of intricate components. We can envision multiple rows of beads, not merely strung but meticulously arranged in a complex, graded pattern. The materials would have been the most precious available, chosen for both their beauty and their symbolic resonance within the new Eightness theology. Tubular beads of the purest gold would have represented the flesh of the gods and the light of the sun disk itself. These would have been interspersed with vibrant fields of deep blue lapis lazuli, a stone that even in this new religion still held its power as a piece of the celestial realm from which the Aten's rays descended. Inlays of fiery red carnelian would have symbolized the life-giving blood and the vital energy of the sun's power, while brilliant green feldspar could have evoked the renewal of the earth under the Aten's beneficent gaze. The terminals of her collars, the parts that hung down her back, were likely as elaborate as the front. Instead of the traditional falcon heads seen in earlier periods, Amarna art suggests a preference for more naturalistic or symbolic floral motifs that aligned with their worship of the natural world as a manifestation of the Aten's creation. We might imagine terminals shaped like graceful lotus blossoms or bunches of grapes, all crafted from gold and inlaid with colorful stones, serving as a constant reminder of the fertility and abundance that the royal couple, as the sole intermediaries of the Aten, were responsible for channeling to the people. What truly set Nefertiti's presumed jewelry apart was how it functioned as political and religious propaganda. In the famous Berlin bust, her sheer, sleek gown is almost upstaged by the magnificent colors she wears. This was intentional. The weight and opulence of such a piece would have physically anchored her, presenting an image of solid, unmovable power and permanence. In temple reliefs where she stands opposite Akhenaten, often smiting female enemies or making offerings, her collars are depicted as being just as large and elaborate as his, a visual language screaming that her status was unparalleled in Egyptian history. She was not just a queen, she was a goddess on earth, the mistress of joy, and a vital half of the divine partnership that received the Aten's blessings directly. The designs themselves would have broken from tradition to reflect the new aesthetic and theological ideals of Amarna. The rigid, formal patterns of older collars might have given way to more fluid, naturalistic designs. We can speculate about patterns that mimicked the rippling rays of the sun, perhaps with drop-shaped pendants of gold or faience that swayed with her movement, catching the light like the sun's own hands bestowing the ankh. The entire piece would have been less a static piece of regalia and more a dynamic, glittering extension of the sunlight she and her husband worshipped, a physical echo of the energy they believed flowed through them. Ultimately, to imagine Nefertiti's broad collar is to imagine the woman herself, brilliant, powerful, radiant, and revolutionary. It was a piece that fused immense material wealth with profound ideological meaning, a shield of gold and gems that protected her divine personage and proclaimed her unique authority. While the gold may have been melted down and the gems repurposed by later rulers seeking to erase her memory, the stone depictions endure, forever preserving the echo of a queen whose jewelry was as formidable and fascinating as the legacy she left behind. But if the celestial blue of lapis connected the pharaoh to the heavens, the fiery, vital red of carnelian anchored his power in the very blood of life itself. This vibrant stone, ranging in hue from the deep orange of a sunset to the rich, blood red of a fresh wound, was one of the most magically charged materials in the entire Egyptian arsenal. It wasn't chosen for its beauty alone, its color was a direct and powerful metaphor. In a desert culture where water was life and the Nile's annual flood was a divine event, the color red was inextricably linked to the potent, life-sustaining force of blood. It represented power, vitality, and the fiery energy of the sun god Ra, but it also held a more protective, apotropaic quality, the power to repel evil through its own potent, life-affirming force. This belief in carnelian's protective power made it an absolute essential in the creation of amulets, those small but magically mighty objects designed to shield the living and guide the dead. The most common form was the simple yet powerful bead, Royal workshops would painstakingly drill and polish thousands of these tiny red orbs to be strung into broad collars and bracelets. When a queen wore a necklace alternating gold with carnelian beads, she wasn't just accessorizing, she was constructing a barrier of protective energy around her neck, a vulnerable point believed to be susceptible to evil influences. Each bead was a miniature shield, its vibrant color thought to dazzle and confuse malevolent spirits, turning their gaze away from the wearer. The effect in the bright Egyptian sun would have been dazzling, a rippling cascade of liquid fire that both announced her status and cloaked her in a mantle of sacred security. The use of carnelian extended far beyond simple strands of beads. It was a favorite material for rings, where its protective qualities could be literally at one's fingertips. A signet ring with a carnelian bezel was not only a practical tool for sealing documents with a stamp of authority, but also a constant, personal ward against misfortune. More elaborate were the exquisite inlays for which Egyptian jewelers were justly famous. Imagine a golden pectoral in the shape of a falcon, the symbol of the god Horus. Its body might be crafted from gold, but the intricate feathers of its wings would be meticulously defined with slivers of deep blue lapis lazuli and vibrant red carnelian. This wasn't merely decorative, it was a deliberate fusion of symbolic colors. The blue lapis connected the deity to the celestial realm, while the red carnelian infused the representation with the living, breathing power of divine blood, making the amulet infinitely more potent. Evidence of this profound belief is scattered throughout the royal tombs that have survived the millennia. In the tomb of the noblewoman Seneptisi, her mummy was adorned with a magnificent broad collar featuring row upon row of carnelian and faience beads, a literal blanket of protection for her journey to the afterlife. But perhaps the most telling examples come from the wrappings of Tutankhamun himself. Among his vast funerary assemblage, archaeologists discovered a breathtaking golden dagger. The blade itself was of celestial iron, but the handle was a masterpiece of protective artistry. It was crafted from gold and inlaid with a stunningly complex pattern of overlapping feathers, a design known as rishi. And the material chosen to create the delicate, life-giving details within each golden feather, carnelian. The craftsmen selected the stone of blood and vitality to line the weapon that would defend the king in the afterlife, ensuring that every time he grasped the hilt, he was channeling the ultimate power of life to ward off the forces of death and chaos. This single artifact perfectly encapsulates the Egyptian mindset. For them, the best defense was not a threat, but an overwhelming, radiant affirmation of life itself. Rising from the brow of every pharaoh, a creature of coiled power and lethal elegance stood eternally vigilant. The uraeus, this was not a mere decorative emblem, it was a living symbol of divine fury and protection, a golden cobra forever poised to strike at the enemies of Egypt's king. Crafted with breathtaking skill, the finest uraei were masterpieces of the metalsmith's art. The serpent's body was often wrought from the purest gold, its scales meticulously textured by fine chasing with a sharp tool. Its expanded hood, flared in a perpetual state of warning, provided a perfect canvas for dazzling inlay. Artisans would set it with alternating bands of deep blue lapis lazuli, fiery red carnelian, and perhaps even vibrant green feldspar, creating a hypnotic and fearsome display of color. Some versions even featured a small, separately made head that could be attached, allowing its gaze to be directed with intentional precision. This was a jewel, but it was a weapon first. Its power was drawn directly from the goddess Wadjet, one of the earliest and most formidable deities of the Nile. Wadjet, the green one, or papyrus-colored one, was the protective goddess of Lower Egypt, often depicted as a cobra or a woman with a cobra's head. She was the fiery eye of the sun god Ra, a being of immense destructive power who could be sent forth to incinerate his enemies. By wearing her image on his crown, the pharaoh was channeling this Ra, divine authority. The uraeus was his ultimate bodyguard, a magical sentinel that needed no sleep. It was believed to spit searing flames or venomous fire at any who dared threaten the sanctity of the king's person, incinerating traitors and rebels with a mere glance. This transformed the pharaoh from a mortal ruler into a walking, divine arsenal, his very presence guarded by the concentrated wrath of the gods. We find the uraeus present on virtually every form of royal headgear, each context amplifying its meaning. It adorned the classic striped Nemes headcloth, as seen on the mask of Tutankhamun, where it sits centered above his brow, its golden body and lapis stripes a miniature echo of the headdress itself. It was an integral part of the double crown, the pecent, which combined the red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt. Here, the uraeus represented Wadjet's dominion over the north, balanced by the vulture goddess Nekhbit of the south, often shown on the same crown. Even on the more humble Khat headcloth or the blue Kepresh war crown, the uraeus was always there, a constant reminder that whether in the temple, the palace, or on the chariot charging into battle, the pharaoh was always a divine being, protected by a force that could unleash cosmic retribution. Beyond its defensive role, the uraeus was the ultimate political statement. Its presence on a statue or a relief was a definitive marker of royalty. To be depicted with the uraeus was to claim the throne itself. This makes its occasional appearances on the brow of queens like the powerful Hatshepsut or the famed Cleopatra especially significant. For a woman to wear the uraeus was to claim the full, undiluted power of the pharaoh, adopting the masculine symbolism of divine kingship and making it her own. It was a bold declaration that she possessed the same authority, the same protection, and the same right to command as any male ruler. The golden cobra was more than an ornament, it was the blazing, unblinking eye of sovereignty itself, a promise of power kept and a warning of vengeance delivered, ensuring that all who looked upon the king would know they stood in the presence of a living God. While the treasures of kings and queens often dominate our imagination, it is sometimes within the tombs of the royal court that we find the most exquisite examples of ancient artistry, pieces that reveal a world of staggering wealth and sophisticated taste extending far beyond the throne itself. A perfect testament to this is the breathtaking broad collar discovered in the tomb of Princess Sithathorenet at Lahan, a masterpiece that showcases the absolute pinnacle of Middle Kingdom jewelry design and reminds us that the golden age of Egyptian art was not confined to the royal palace. Crafted with an almost unbelievable level of precision, this collar is a symphony in gold and semi-precious stone. Imagine a foundation of 6 finely chased rows of gold hollow beads, each one a perfect tubular shape, creating a dense, flexible mesh of solar metal. But the true marvel lies in the terminals, the parts that would have hung down the wearer's back. Here, the goldsmiths have fashioned the heads of falcons from the thinnest sheet gold, their features exquisitely detailed. These aren't simple silhouettes, they are miniature sculptures, with eyes that would have once held inlays of obsidian to give them a piercing, lifelike gaze. The falcons are set within a frame of alternating gold and deep blue lapis lazuli, a color combination that symbolized the union of the sun and the heavens. The entire piece is then bordered with hanging pendants shaped like dates and flowers, each one carefully formed from gold and inlaid with carnelian, turquoise, and lapis, creating a shimmering, rhythmic fringe that would have moved with a soft, musical clinking sound. The technical skill required to create such an object is a clear indicator of a highly specialized and advanced workshop operating directly under royal patronage. The use of the cloisonné technique, creating tiny cells with gold wire and filling them with precisely cut stones, shows a mastery that would not be surpassed for centuries. The ability to work with such a variety of materials, each with its own hardness and properties, from the malleability of gold to the brittleness of lapis lazuli, speaks to generations of accumulated knowledge. This was not the work of a solitary artisan, it was the product of a team of experts, each a master in their own niche, from the stone cutters who shaped the gems to the gold beaters who hammered the metal to a feather-like thinness, all collaborating to create a single, perfect object. What makes Sithithorianet's collar so remarkable is that it belonged to a princess, not a ruling pharaoh. Her father was likely Senusret II, and her burial within the pyramid complex at Lahan signifies her esteemed status. This single piece of jewelry forces us to recalibrate our understanding of Middle Kingdom society. The sheer volume of gold and the expense of the imported lapis lazuli represent a fortune, a concentration of wealth that was being lavished not just on the king, but on the extended royal family and the highest echelons of the court. It tells a story of a stable, prosperous, and confident dynasty, one that could afford to patronize unparalleled artistic excellence and distribute its symbols of power among its loyal elite. This collar was more than an adornment, it was a physical token of favor, a marker of immense privilege, and a declaration that its wearer existed at the very zenith of a glittering, golden world. From the celestial iron of Tutankhamun's dagger forged from a star to the protective golden vulture that shielded his mummy for eternity, the royal jewelry of ancient Egypt reveals a world where beauty was deeply intertwined with power, magic, and the profound desire for immortality. We've wandered through a landscape of bizarre and breathtaking artifacts, each one a testament to a civilization that saw the divine in the gleam of metal and the color of a stone. The ceremonial fish pendant of Queen Ahhotep wasn't just a pretty trinket, it was a military medal and a symbol of her role as a unifying leader. The enormous earlobe plugs of Akhenaten were a radical declaration of a new religion, marking the pharaoh as the sole listener to a singular sun god. And the humble scarab beetle, carved from brilliant faience or gleaming carnelian, held within its form the entire Egyptian belief in cyclical rebirth and the daily resurrection of the sun. What makes these pieces so fascinating is that they were never just adornments, they were functional objects in the journey of the soul, each material chosen for its specific spiritual properties. Gold was the flesh of the gods, lapis lazuli was a piece of the night sky, and carnelian contained the very blood of life. A broad collar was a shield for the vulnerable throat, a cartouche ring was a portable signature for the soul, and a simple faience bead net was a magical web of protection. These objects show us that for the ancient Egyptians, preparing for death was an act of meticulous and glorious life, an all-encompassing effort to ensure that every part of the self, from the heart to the fingertips, was preserved, protected, and transformed for an eternal existence among the stars. This deep dive into their royal treasures is really a window into their entire worldview, a culture that blended art, science, religion, and politics into a seamless and dazzling whole. It challenges our modern separation of the spiritual and the material, reminding us of a time when a piece of jewelry could be a prayer, a weapon, and a promise of life everlasting. I'd love to know which of these extraordinary items captured your imagination the most. Was it the otherworldly meteorite dagger, the fearsome golden flies of valor, or perhaps the intimate golden toe stalls that ensured a king would walk whole into the afterlife? Let me know your favorite in the comments below. I read every single one. If you've enjoyed unraveling these ancient mysteries with me, there are so many more secrets waiting to be uncovered. The world of the pharaohs is endlessly surprising, and this is just the beginning. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the past, where we'll continue to explore the lost wonders and hidden stories of our incredible history. Thank you for watching.